I don't care what anyone says, but I will never change my position on buying a property in Europe, America, or United Kingdom. Any country where you have to mortgage a property, you have to buy the property and pay instrumentally, is a scam. Owning a property that takes you 20 to 30 years to pay is a total scam. Because in the buying and selling market, if you have to buy something now and they tell you pay later, it means the burden is on you. The risk is on you. Any changes in the future is on you. Whatever happens in the next 10, 20 years is on you. So the idea of buying now and paying later or paying as time goes on, for me, it is a total scam. And why am I saying that? The average cost of property, for example, in the United Kingdom, we are looking anywhere from 300,000 or 200 to 300,000 just in the United Kingdom. But if we are looking at the average cost of property in London, perhaps it might be around 400 to 600,000 pounds, which is crazy. This is madness. Why would anyone want to buy a 3-bedroom house, even in most cases a 2-bedroom house, for 400,000 pounds and spend 30 years paying for a 2-bedroom house? As I said, the risk is on you. Every economic, political, social, any factor that comes in place or any regulation that comes in place after you've purchased that property, you have to bear the risk. As we know, governments make changes every now and then. They introduce new taxes. They increase taxes, inheritance tax, capital gains tax. So all the burden you've bought the property, because you have to pay instrumentally, anything to do with interest rate, to do with changes in the economy, you have to be responsible. So that is why I think buying or a mortgage, for you to mortgage a property, is an absolute scam. But whenever I have this conversation with people, they say, oh, it's not a scam, it's an investment. I'm always being told it's an investment. I agree, there's an investment element of it. But buying a property for you to stay in that property for 25 years to 30 years, paying for it, for me does not make sense. Why is it that the average cost of property in the United Kingdom back in the 80s, why people were paying £20,000 for property? I was talking to a lovely lady who has been in the UK since the 80s, and she bought her 3-bedroom house for £40,000. My auntie, she lived in the UK since the 80s, and she also had friends who bought property for £30,000. How all of a sudden, all the way from 80s to 2025, 40 years, 45 years later, the cost of property is now £600,000? Why? What a drastic change. How can you justify that change? Because surely people who were working in the 80s, the salary they were making during those days or during that time, you cannot tell me their salary has multiplied 200 folds. You cannot tell me that's not the case, because I know how much people were making in the 80s. But going back to the discussion of property being mortgaging a property is a scam. And the reason why I say mortgaging a property is a scam, I was talking to a friend recently who bought a land, built a house, and she wanted to put the house for rent. So the house was a 5-bedroom house. 5-bedroom house in West Africa, wanted to put it for rent. The entire cost of buying the land, the building and labor and everything was not even more than £20,000. We are talking about 5-bedroom house with 2 bathrooms, 2 toilets, 2 kitchens, with a lot of space, a lot of land space for garden, for swimming pool, everything. And she did not spend anything more than £20,000. £20,000. Say, for example, she wants to build a 10-bedroom house. She will not spend anything more than £40,000. Highest £50,000. And we are talking outside of Europe now. Let's say she wants to build a 15-bedroom house. She will not spend anything more than £80,000. Maybe highest £100,000 for a 15-bedroom house in another country, in another continent. If I want to purchase a 15-bedroom house in the United Kingdom, I will not even be in a position to buy it. I cannot even have them. The bank will not even authorize such transaction. I don't even think I'll meet the credit score criteria or the financial capability to own a 15-bedroom house in the United Kingdom, Europe, or America, because that will be equivalent to a mansion. Whereas in another country, somebody can spend £80,000 or even $80,000 or euros, and they have a 15-bedroom house to themselves. And the interesting part is that £80,000, let's say in another country, there are people who can work all their life and they will raise that money, or there are people with businesses and they will raise that money, and they will build that 15-bedroom house without owing the bank or without even owing any money to any financial institution. I am from West Africa, Nigeria. If I have to convert £80,000 or £60,000, we are looking anywhere from 100 million to 120 million naira in Nigeria currency. There are people who've worked really extremely hard with really good businesses, and they can raise that money and afford to build a 15-bedroom house without any mortgage agreement, without any loans, without any interest or high interest agreement, nothing. And this is why I have to say, mortgaging a property, you mortgage a 3-bedroom warehouse. You are actually staying in a warehouse in Europe, UK, America. It's a warehouse because you are living in a flat amongst other people. You don't have your own garden. You don't have your own open space. You don't have your own private space. And you spend 30 years of your life paying 500 to 600,000 pounds or dollars or euros for a 3-bedroom house. Come on. As much as you are saying it's an investment, so are we now saying if I pay 600,000 pounds for a 3-bedroom house, in 20 years time, that property will be worth, let's say 800,000, 900,000? Because if we look at the timeline from the 80s, average cost of prices, property prices in London, we are looking around 32,000, 40,000 pounds in London. Today, in London, average prices are between 400 to 600,000 pounds. Are you now telling me in the next 30 years or 40 years, are you not telling me that house will be worth 1.2 million? So double the price. Oh my God. I just have to keep my stance on this. Mortgages, buying a property and paying for 3 decades To me, I don't know what anybody can say. Something that you cannot pay, you cannot pay it straight away. Then you have too much burden. There's too much factors against you. There's a lot of things not in your favor, because suddenly the bank is now your landlord. If the bank say jump, you jump. If the government say jump, you jump. So I would so much like to own a house, but at the end of the day, when I think of it, because look at it, the reason why most people would buy property, they are buying property in Europe, United Kingdom, America. People are buying property in these places because of, number one, security. You want to be in a secure country. You want to be in a country where the law works. You want to be in a country where crime rate is low. You want to be in a country where things are structured. You want to be in a country where your family can have a good quality life, good health care. You want to be in a country where your children can have good education, your children can have a brighter future. So when people are making that commitment to spend 30 years of their life paying for a mortgage, they are paying for all this and all these things. Because if I give you an example, you have a country where everything is secure. You know that there's security, there's so many benefits, and you have nothing to worry. There are jobs, there are lots of business opportunities, and somebody will now tell you the cost of a 15-bedroom house is £60,000. Will you not really relocate to that country? If somebody said the cost of a 15-bedroom house is £60,000 or €60,000, most of us will relocate to that country. And this is why people are moving out of the Europe, that whole Europe-centric society. People are moving out because you cannot be a prisoner for 30 years in your own house. You have to work extremely hard to pay for that house. Maybe this is just me being skeptical or in denial when it comes to mortgages, but that is just how I see it. I will not have an issue buying a house in Europe or United Kingdom if a 5-bedroom house costs £30,000, or a 5-bedroom house costs, let's say the most, a 5-bedroom house costs £50,000. I will not have an issue. I'll buy it straight away. But don't come and rob me and tell me a 3-4-bedroom house when I don't even own the land. I only own the space. And that is another scam. Majority of all these properties, you own the space, you don't own the land. That is some of that crazy term that people have to agree to. The land is not yours. You just leasing the property or leasing the space. How? I don't know. How? Sometimes I'm just speechless when I talk about this. How is that possible? Whereas in West Africa, in other countries, you can own your 15-bedroom house. You own the land. You own 100% of that geographical location for the cost of almost nothing. And then you want me to come and pay £600,000 for a 3-bedroom. I'm not the owner of the land. If I want to make adjustment to that house, I have to seek permission from the local authority. Anyway, maybe it's just me.